Hey everybody, welcome to chapter 36. This is the biggest chapter, I think, probably in the whole book. So we got a lot to do on this one. It's World War II and the Cold War, which why they put both of these together in the same chapter, I don't know. But it's a big one. So let's get this party started. I'm going to try to keep it in 2 videos, but I don't know that that's going to happen. It might end up being 3 videos. We'll see how it goes. So let's get to it. All right, so some of the big ones were, really what caused World War II is one of the big questions. What's going on in the world? We just fought a world war. There's the 805 bill. We just fought a world war over dominance and rivalries, and now 20 years later, we're right back at it again. So we're going to see, really what some of the catalysts were for that. And then, why would Nazi Germany, all the way over there in the middle of Europe, ally with themselves with an imperialistic nation all the way in the Pacific Ocean? So we're going to see what they had in common and what pulled them together. And then how the United States managed to not break any of their own laws through the use of the Lend Lease program. So that's part one. Let's get to it. So we got Axis versus Allies powers. We can see that Italy, Germany, and Japan formed the Axis powers. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan at that time was under the leadership of pretty much a military dictatorship. And so a lot of people were very unsatisfied with the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, and they wanted to revisit some of these. Some people didn't, some people did, and eventually they ended up just tossing them in the trash. And we're going to see that those who are aggressors were given an opportunity to stop being aggressive, and they said they would, and they didn't. And we're going to see how war started in 39, and it's global in 41, and it's all done by 1945. So let's move over to Japan. We know that Japan had been fighting with the Russians over chunks of Manchuria, and they signed the Russo-Japanese Treaty. Teddy Roosevelt won a Nobel Prize because of that. But then Japan sets its sight on an area of the world that was quite vulnerable, and that was northern China. Really, because China was going through their own revolution at the end of the Qing dynasty, and really did not have the support from any imperialistic power really to stop them. And so, why not go get these resources? There's a lot of farmland there. There's a lot of crops to be harvested. Why not take it? And they started pushing into Manchuria in the early 30s, and then by 37 they're going full bore into Nanjing. 400,000 Chinese are used and abused in that city. A lot of the homes are destroyed, and what we see now is the Soviet Union wants to, really kind of, take note of what's going on, thinking that maybe their territory is next. They sign a neutrality pact, and then they sign a deal with Germany and Italy, really because Nazi Germany wanted somebody on the other side of Russia to keep Russia busy should they have to invade Russia, and Japan was the perfect ally in that capacity. Chinese tried to resist. They tied down the Japanese army, but remember the Chinese had their own problems at the time. They had Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek duking it out all the way across the country for the last 10 years, trying to assert their dominance on the political scene. And all that is interrupted by the Japanese aggression. But it turns out that, um, really, Mao's forces had a better record going up against the Japanese. So a lot of people just simply supported Mao because it looked like he was going to be the guy to bring China back into prominence. So eventually that's going to pay off for him. But there's still clashes between the two. And as soon as the war's over, these two are going to finish it off. And Chiang Kai-shek's going to get kicked over to Taiwan, and the Chinese Communist Party is going to take over China. In Italy, we know Benito Mussolini. He's the fascist dictator of Italy. Comes into power when Italy's kind of in a malaise. They've been independent country now, and reunified Italy for about 50 years. But where's the glory? Where's the power? And they didn't have it. The economy's in the tank, and the government is ineffective. So Mussolini steps in and says, "Hey, I got all the answers. I can fix all the problems." And so he does. The problem is that once he got in power and nobody could get him out of there, he most certainly abused his power. And he tried to take over Ethiopia, and he did. occupied Ethiopia for quite a while, went into Libya and into Albania. A lot of Ethiopians died in this process, but never really colonized it, just simply occupied it for a short time. In Germany, of course, we got this remilitarized Germany. Remember, Germany was really hampered by the Treaty of Versailles and how big their military could be. But Hitler says, you know what? I don't think so. Basically, stuck his tongue out at France and England, says, we're not going to pay back any more of our reparations. And America, thanks for the money, but we're not going to pay you back either. Because there's really nothing they can do if they don't. And so what we see is in 38, Hitler goes off and annexes Austria. They call it an Anschluss or the Union, but really he just took over this country without really much of a fight. And then he gets a chunk of what today is Czech Republic, called the Sudetenland, which is primarily occupied by German-speaking people. And so he says, "Well, you're all German too, so we're just going to take you guys too." And that's when things got weird. Because the rest of the world really stands up and takes notice during that time. So they get together at this Munich conference. It was France, Great Britain, Germany, and a representative from the United States, Joseph Kennedy. That's John F. Kennedy's dad, who was a senator from Massachusetts on the Foreign Relations Committee. And Great Britain had Chamberlain, who says, yeah, let's go in there and tell Hitler what for. Tell him, you can't take any more territory. You can't do it, buddy. You can keep what you got, but you got to stop. Otherwise, we're going to have to get angry with you. And chastising him. Hitler just sat there and says, you know what? You're right. Okay, I'll cut a deal. You're right. I'll stop, whatever. And as soon as they walked out the door, he started planning an invasion of Poland. Because, why not? The bully, if he takes your lunch money today, he's going to want more than your lunch money tomorrow. He's going to want your lunch money and your shoes. And that's what Hitler did. And so what Hitler did is he also said, if I go into Poland, that means that France has a deal with Poland, and that means I'm at war with France, and I'm going to have to go into France. And then the UK is going to get drawn into that too. And I only want to fight on one front. I don't want to fight on the Eastern Front and the Western Front. So after he rolls into Poland, takes over Poland with his blitzkrieg in about 10 minutes, he's got to deal with Russia on the other end. So he signs a deal with Russia that says, okay, we will push all the way to this place. You push all the way to the other side. We'll meet at the river and nobody shoots at each other. And then we can focus on the Western Front over in France. And Russia says, sounds like a deal. Stalin cuts a deal with him. And that's really how things got started in 39. He goes into Poland in September of 1939 in this lightning war. Nobody had ever seen anything like this because this is the first time that a war is fought with trucks, tanks, jeeps, and cars. He's not moving troops, on foot, 5 miles a day, camping out on the edge of the mountains on the leeward side, blah blah blah. He's moving 40 miles an hour down the highway, and he's blowing up everything that he can see. And so it doesn't take long to move all the way across the country if you're doing it that way. These armored divisions are moving as fast as the vehicles could go. And the German U-boats are patrolling the Atlantic and the North Sea, sinking anything that resembles something that's going to go against what they got planned. And so shortly after, in the springtime, they go into France. They go and grab Denmark. They start pushing into Norway, and they move across Belgium and France with very little opposition. The French surrender, no trouble at all. The Nazis get Paris and most of France, and force the French to sign an armistice agreement. We're not going to fight anymore. There's not much they could do about it. And so his next target was Britain. And he starts bombing London and surrounding communities with the Luftwaffe. And 40,000 British civilians are killed, mostly in London. If you've ever seen the movie Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first Narnia. Sorry, light timers. How about right there? There we go. The reason that those kids are sent out of London is because of the Blitz, and they end up at Uncle Al's place or whatever it was out in the country, and they go into the wardrobe, blah blah. Right, and that's all because of this event. For about 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, the Luftwaffe is bombing the snot out of Britain, and there's really nothing they can do about it. And so a new technology known as radar starts to be used, and they put up big radar towers all up and down the coast surrounding the whole eastern and southern coast of the island. And pretty soon they start to detect the German bombers coming, 100 miles out. and they could start scrambling their fighters to go intercept them. And that kind of ended the Blitz. But for about 8 weeks, it was pretty bad. In the fall of 40, it was pretty rough. And eventually they got them. They got him to stop. Operation Barbarossa. This is Hitler's plan to move into Eastern Europe for more Lebensraum, or living room, living space, etc. What we see here in June of 41 is, remember, Hitler had a deal with Stalin, says, we're not going to go any further than Poland. But then, I mean, he's not going to hold up to that end of the deal. And he invades the Soviet Union. And Hitler's moving so fast across the Ukraine, across Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and he gets a long ways in that summer. But what he has to deal with is his biggest enemy is the Russian winter. Remember, he's at about 50 degrees north latitude, and it's really stinking cold up there in the middle of the continent. And how do you deal with that? Get supply lines in, everything's frozen solid. You're running on tanks and jeeps and trucks, and it's 30 below zero. It's going to slow you down. And that gives the Soviets all winter to really regroup and put a plan together. And eventually they end up in Stalingrad, fighting for the city, because Stalingrad was a key turning point in the war, probably the biggest battle in history in the world. Because what you got is, millions of Nazis trying to get this city of Stalingrad, which is right on the rail line between the Black Sea and Moscow. And if the Russians lose Stalingrad, they lose their access to the Black Sea. And why is it so important? Is because that's the only ice-free port that Moscow has. Because through the Battle of St. Petersburg, the Nazis started to control St. Petersburg, which is only ice-free 6 months of the year, and everything else is frozen solid. So the Russians, it was necessary to get access to the Black Sea. And if they got Stalingrad, they cut Russia off from the Black Sea. And that means it's only a matter of time before Moscow falls. Because Russia buys stuff from all over the world, ships it into the Black Sea, puts it in a port, runs it on a rail line to Stalingrad. They make stuff, they do stuff, industrial center, and then ship it up to Moscow. But if they lose Stalingrad, they're going to lose Moscow, and they're done. And so for 9 months, they fight somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million Russians, about half and half civilians and military, and about 800,000 Nazis over the course of 9 months die in this process of the Nazis trying to get Stalingrad. Eventually, the last Nazis get surrounded and captured or killed. And that's the turning point, because that's when the Russians start to push the Nazis back toward Germany. So we'll watch this video right here. It's a little bit of Stalingrad. We'll get a little bit more into that as we go. So you can see here how far the Nazis actually expanded. Anything green is Nazi conquered territory, all the way out through here. They get a long stinking ways, all the way into Russia, not quite to Moscow and not quite through Stalingrad. And then these countries are areas that basically gave up and said, okay, Nazis, you can roll on through and use our country. Just don't kill us and burn our country to the ground. And so they technically joined the Axis powers, but really only as a matter of self-preservation. So let's switch over to the Pacific and what's going on here, or actually before the United States got involved. How do they support the Allies? The United States wants to remain entirely neutral. Remember, what got them into World War I was that unrestricted submarine warfare. The Germans, they're not Nazis yet, were blowing up American boats full of stuff for England and France. They didn't like that, so they blew up their boats. And then they blew up the Lusitania and a whole bunch of Americans on a British ship, which, if it's hauling military supplies, then the Germans have every right to blow it up, and they kill a bunch of Americans. So they signed the Neutrality Acts that say you can't sell anything to any combative nations. No Americans can ride on any boats by any combative nations, and they're going to avoid those problems that got America into the First World War. And so it became very, very clear that the United States was not going to side with the Nazis. And so how do you get war supplies? How do you get war supplies to these countries without selling them war supplies and putting them on boats? Well, you tell them, we'll sell you whatever you want. You can pay later, and you got to come and get them yourself. But we're going to cut it off right there for video number 1. See you in part 2.